Let's continue now in the Gemara over here, and we're up to on page 8b at the end, the very bottom of the page. We're almost up to 9b. We were talking about why we should not make a wedding on Chalamoid. The Gemara says not to make a wedding of Chalamoid. The Mishnah said because it is a joy for the person, and the Gemara wanted to know. So what's the problem if it's a joy? A yontiv, you're supposed to be happy. The commissioner says that you shouldn't get married because it's a joy getting married. Wait till they find out. No. But since it's a joy to get married, it's a simcha. So that should be a reason yet to get married. Why are we saying you shouldn't get married? And the Gemara gave various different reasons. One reason is you don't want to mix two simchas together. Other one is that you don't want to. We're going to talk about all these. The other reason was we don't want you to neglect the joy of the holiday, and you will be just occupying the simcha with your wife. And the other reason is because people might push off their marriage for Chalamoid. That seems to be a good time. Nobody's working. So it's a time where everybody's free. So you might figure that would be a good time to get married. And so people will delay their wedding until Yom Tov, till Chol HaMoed. And in the meantime, they're not having any children. They're delaying period of Arivia. We shouldn't do that. Okay. Those were the different opinions. So now we're up to the bottom of the page. Zog the Gemara Meiseve. So the Gemara says, I'll ask you a question. I just want to make a mention that.
You want to go for next week?
So we're saying that the Mishnah says like this, that Kol Eilu Sha'amru Asurin Lisa B'Moyed. All those that we said that you are prohibited to get married on Yom Tov. I guess because there were some that are allowed, like a person who's bringing back his divorced wife is permissible, is permitted. It's only a Psula Almana, a Yibum, you're not allowed to, but a returning wife that you're remarrying is okay. But Kol Eilu Sha'amru Asurim Lisa B'Moyed. But all those in which they said that it is prohibited to marry them during the Yom Tov. So turn the page, Tes Samad Aleph, Mutorim Lisa Erev Haregel. But the day before Yom Tov, that is permissible. While you're not allowed to get married on Yom Tov, but the day before Yom Tov, it is permissible. Mutorim Lisa Erev Haregel, it's permissible to marry on the eve of the Yom Tov. And Rashi translate, what does it mean, Mutorim Lisa Erev Haregel? Koloimar Mutar Lechatchila. That it's okay Lechatchila. Why is he telling us this halacha? I mean, why not? Why doesn't it tell you can get married on Tuesday? I mean, what's the problem? So Rashi explains, even though it turns out that the 7 days of the Sheva Brachas will be during the holiday, so you're going to be celebrating. You'll be celebrating on Sukkot, on the Chol HaMoed, and on Yom Tov. Still, you're allowed to get married on Erev the Yom Tov. And the Gemara says, Kashya Lekulhu, this seems to be problematic according to all opinions. Kashya Lekulhu, why? And as the Gemara is going to explain how no. Well, if you don't want to mix Simcha with Simcha, why would you want to mix the Simcha's Yom Tov with a marriage, with a Sheva Brachas? If you're afraid that people are going to push it off, maybe they'll push it off to Erev Yom Tov also, or if you're afraid that people are not going to be rejoicing with the Yom Tov, they'll be busy with the Chasana. So same thing will happen if he gets married Erev Yom Tov. Why are we allowed to get married before Yom Tov because all of the reasons. The Gemara says, Kashya Likulhu. This is problematic according to all of the different of opinions, the reasoning that you gave. And the Gemara says, Loi Kashya. This is not really a question. The Gemara is going to say each one. Leman de Omar Mishum Simcha. The one who says that you're not allowed to get married because you don't want to mix the joys together. So if the issue is Simcha, it's not a problem that you're going to mix the Sheva Bracha Simcha later on, because Iker Simcha Chad Yomahu. The main Simcha is the first day. The Sheva Brachas, the 7 days that follow, that's not such a Simcha. We don't care to mix that with the other one. So therefore, according to the reasoning why we don't get married on Chalamayid, because we don't want to mix Simcha with Simcha, it would be okay to marry Erev Yontif, because the fact that the middle of Sheva Brachas is going to be Yontif, that's okay. Lamando Amar Mishum Tircha. Oh, that was another one. We didn't mention that one, but the Gemara also said the one that says that you might invest all your efforts in the chasana, and you're not going to trouble for the Yontif. You might neglect it. So again, we're not afraid that you're not going to trouble yourself later on, because the main trouble is for the first day, is for the day of the chasana. Lamando Amar Mishum Tircha. The one who says because of trouble, because we don't want you to trouble yourself only for the young, not for Ika Tircha Chad Yoma. The main trouble is for 1 day. So therefore, it's not a non-issue. The following days doesn't matter. So if you make the chasana on Erev Sukkot, say, so doesn't matter. You're not going to take away from the Yontif. Lamando Omar Mishum Bittul Piri V'Rivya. The one who says, well, you're going to leave it for the Yontif, and the Gemara says Erev Yontif is okay because L'chad Yomo Le'marshi Inish Nafshi. Person is not going to allow just for 1 day. So let's say the person wants to get married in Hanukkah, let's say, right? He's going to say, no. I'm not going to get married to Hanukkah. Everybody's busy. I'm going to wait till Erev Yontif. What happens that you won't be able to make? I mean, it's not like today we have to set up the days 2 years in advance and get the caterer and get the photographer and the musicians, everybody in place, and the flowers, everything in place at the right time. Over there, they used to do it a little bit less, more ceremoniously. They would get the things that they needed together more quickly. So a person would be afraid.
Just kill a goat and you're ready to go.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. And so a person is always afraid, as Rashi explains, to leave it over for 1 day. So he's going to make his wedding Erev Sukkot. He wants to get married in Hanukkah. Why? But what happens? Something happens Erev Sukkot or Erev Pesach, I should say. Is not going to have the chance to make the wedding then. So L'chad Yemei L'mashi Inish Nafshi. L'chad L'mashi Inish Koloimar. Rashi says what it means to say is as follows. Kivon she'eina yochel lahaschil elo be'erev haregel. Since we don't let him to start only on before the Yontiv. In other Yontiv, we don't let him. But we're saying to him, you can do it on before Yontiv. Ein mamtinim al haregel. People are not going to wait for the Yontiv then. Why? The Dilma Misrami Milsa Delay Motzi Maschil Be'erev Haregel. Maybe something is going to happen that he's not going to be able to make the wedding on the day before the Yom Tov. Then he won't be able to start all the Yom Tov. He's not going to take such a chance. So therefore, he said, if you want to do that of Yom Tov, it's fine. Because we don't suspect that the person, that's going to be the time that he wants to do it. Because otherwise, he wouldn't delay it if he only has a window of 1 day over there. So according to it, looks like if he wants to maybe start on 2 days before Yom Tov, maybe that should not be allowed. I don't know. We have to look at the Meforshim. But this argument seems like it only applies to the 1 day, because you're not going to leave it for Yom Tov when you can only do it on 1 day. But what happens if he wants to do it 2 days before Yom Tov. The Mishnah says you can do a lot of marry Erev Yom Tov. What about Erev Yom Tov? What about 2 days before Yom Tov? It almost seems a kol shekain, right? For sure. But l'cheir, according to this reasoning, that the only reason he's afraid to leave it for 1 day and then he won't be able to make the wedding. What happens? He wants to do it 2 days before the Yom Tov. So then he figures, I still got 1 day. Maybe he shouldn't be allowed. It just says Erev according to this reason. I don't know. Got to look it up. Let's go weiter. But here, the Gemara came up with a reason. One of the reasons is we cannot mix up 2 joys together. Now, one thing tells you logically, you can say, one can argue logically, you want to give everybody the full attention. You want to give the holiday the full attention. You want to give the marriage the full attention. You don't want to mix it so one takes away from the other. On the other hand, maybe there'll be an argument to say, well, they enhance. You're going to rejoice both for the holidays and for the wedding, and it's going to be a bigger simcha. But anyways, the Gemara wants to know, where do we know this from? The Gemara says, "Ude'ein ma'arvim simcha b'simcha minola." Where does this come from? Where do we know this? Where do we know this, that you don't mix one simcha with the other simcha? And the Gemara says the ksiv, because there's a pasuk in Melachim Aleph in Perek Ches. So over there is talking about when they constructed the Beis Hamikdash, when Shlomo HaMelech finished building the Beis Hamikdash. So the pasuk says as follows: he made a big party. He made a siyum. He made a celebration of the building of the Mishkan, but it also was right before Sukkot. They did 7 days celebration in order to celebrate the completion of the structure of the building of the Beis Hamikdash that Shlomo built. And after they finished those 7 days, they made another 7 days in which they celebrated the Yom Tov Sukkot. So the pasuk says as follows: Vayas Shlomo ba'Isahi Esachag. So Shlomo at that time made the festival. V'chol Yisrael imay. All the Yidden were with him. And there was a kohol gadol. There was such a great gathering, such a great kohol, milevoy chamos ad nachal Mitzrayim, from the place levoy chamos till the river of Mitzrayim. That's how many people were there. Lifnei Hashem Elokeinu, they made the festival before Hashem our God. He made it 7 days, Shivas Yomim v'Shivas Yomim, 7 days and 7 days. Together, Arba Osher Yom. That's all the pasuk there. Altogether, it was 14 days. He made 7 days for the inauguration of the Mishkan, of the Mikdash, and 7 days for the inauguration for the Yom Tov of Sukkot, 7 days. Now, the Gemara thinks, why did he have to make 2 times 7 days? He could have combined it. V'im isa, the ma'arvim simcha b'simcha. And if it's allowed, if we can make a mix-up 2 simchas, one with the other, he should have waited up till Sukkot, and then he would make 7, which would apply for here and there. It would apply to both places. So why was it necessary for him to make 14 days? 7 here and 7 there? Could have had 7 days and do it for both sides. So that means, and he can make 7 for both. And he will do 7 days of joy, for here and here, meaning lechanukas habayis, for the dedication of the Beis Hamikdash, the bayis, uleregel, and for the holidays. So we know that we don't make. But the Gemara asks, no, maybe that's not the reason because he didn't want to mix them in. Maybe the reason is because they finished it. He didn't want to delay it. You're not allowed to delay. When you finish the Mishka, you're not allowed to delay. So maybe that's the reason why he waited. The Gemara's question is, who says that the reason why they didn't do it together was because we don't mix parties together, we don't mix simchas together? Maybe they didn't do it together because they didn't want to delay. They finished them. The Shlomo Melech finished it, and they didn't want to push it off, so they had to celebrate right away. And then they prayed, and then they celebrated the sukkahs. Frag the Gemara, Vidilmo, perhaps Minter loy natrina. Maybe we're not allowed to wait. If you finish the base, maybe you're not allowed to wait. But if it happened to come out that you ended up the Beis Hamikdash the same time of Sukkot, or two parties happen to come together, maybe there's no problem doing them together. How do you know the reason they didn't make one 7-day celebration is because you don't want to mix the parties together? Rashi. So the question is actually on the wedding. You're saying you can't make a wedding on Chol Hamoed. Why? But because here you see he didn't make it together with the sukkahs. But so the Gemara is saying, well, you don't wait Nisuyin Adaregel. You're not going to delay it till the Yom Tov. Just like Shlomo Melech didn't wait with the inauguration, and he did it right then. But if it happens to happen that you have a wedding at the same time when there's another simcha, just go ahead and do it. Who says you're not allowed to do it? So the Gemara says no. If there is not a if there is no problem, so you say, well, you shouldn't delay the building for that. Maybe you don't delay it, but you can still leave over a little bit. You're not going to delay the stop. What is, in other words, if you're ready to finish it, what we say, no, don't finish it and delay it. No, but you should have left something in there. Like that when you make a siyum, like on a mesachta and a tractate, maybe you finish the whole thing and you leave over a small piece, and then you make the siyum at the end. Same thing is with the Beis Hamikdash. We're not telling him you should have delayed finishing it. Finish it whenever you finish it, but leave over something so you can make the end right by Sukkot, and you'll celebrate the 7 days of Sukkot together with the inauguration if there's no problem of mixing simchas. In that case, if we should say, if it happens, you could do it together. He should have left in the building up till the Yom Tov. So that the inauguration will happen at the Yom Tov. You should have left a little piece, finish it right before Yom Tov. So now Yom Tov, you have a 7-day celebration for the Chanukas Habayis and for the Yom Tov. And the Gemara says, "Shiure binyan Beis Hamikdash loy mishayrina." We don't want to leave over the Beis Hamikdash to leave over pieces. No, we don't do that. Over there, you finish. We don't leave. There's no such a thing as leaving over. But the Gemara says, "Iboyile lishiure ba'amo kalya oirev." The Gemara says, well, you still have a way. If you're going to say, the way they built the Beis Hamikdash, they didn't want the ravens, they didn't want the birds to come on there. That would be disrespectful for the Beis Hamikdash. So they made a very steep roof, and they put nails in there. They didn't want the ravens to sit there. Look what Rashi says. So he says, They could have left that. Should have been. They could have left. Amakalya erev. The roof becomes narrower until there's only one amma left. They covered it with a metal. With nails. They shouldn't sit on it. And he says, that's not considered leftover. But the Gemara said you should have left that piece. And the Gemara answers also, that's for the building. So it's also considered. He didn't want to leave over anything, even that part in the building, which is the Am, he didn't want to leave over. And Zokt Rashi, Lahochi Loy Shaida. So I didn't love there. But if you happen to get a wedding in the holidays, how do we know that you don't do it? So the Gemara is still not sure how we learn it out. The Gemara's argument is the fact that Shlomo didn't wait with any part of and he didn't do it together. Maybe that's not, it's just because you don't delay the finish of the mace. Maybe he happened to finish it 7 days before, so he made it 7 days, then he made another 7 days. But if you have a wedding, maybe you could do a wedding. How do we know not? And the Gemara says we learn out Elu Mediator Kro, because there's an extra pasuk. Because Mirdi Ksiv, the pasuk says, Arba Asher Yom Shivas Yomim Lomalu. It says 14 days. Why does it have to say again 7 days and 7 days? We know 7 and 7 is 14. So why does the pasuk say? You see in the pasuk over there it says Shivas Yomim Arba Asher Yom. Should just say 14 days straight. Why do you say Shivas Yomim? The extra pasuk is to teach us Shema Mino Hani Lechud V'Hani Lechud. Tells you this is separate, that's separate. You have 7 days of inauguration, that's one simcha, and you have another 7 days, which is the other simcha, and I will be right back. Okay, so now we know that, how do we know that we don't make two simchas together? We have an extra pasuk. The Torah says 7 and 7, meaning these are two separate sevens. We shouldn't mix them up, even though already said 14. When we got to say 7 and 7, tell you that you keep them separate. Now, I don't know if you figured this because you didn't ask me. Somebody should have asked the question. What is 7 days before Sukkot?
Yom Kippur.
What do they do about Yom Kippur? How do they have a celebration?
Yeah, I was learning in Nach, I think it was in Divrei Hayamim, that they did a dedication on Yom Kippur, and it wasn't quite clear the guy who's
they didn't do it. Okay, we're going to see that. Yeah, the Gemara discusses that now.
Okay.
Omar Raparnach, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Raparnach in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that Oisei Shano Lo Osu Yisrael Es Yom Kippurim. And that day the Jews didn't do no Yom Kippur. No Yom Kippur. Zokt Rashi Lo Osu Yisrael Yom Kippurim. Lefi Sheshiva Yomim Shalifnei Sukkos Kol Yom, for 7 days before Sukkos, every day Osu Simcha Mishta. They made a party, a joyful day. The Ksiv, as it says in the pasuk, Vayash Shlomo Beis Ahiyas Achag Shivas Yom v'Shivas Yom Arbos Yom. He made a festival, 14 days. So now, so the people were worried, and they would say, Shemon Nischayvu Shoneyim Shel Yisrael Kloya. Maybe the enemies of the Jews need to be destroyed because they didn't. When you don't want to say something, a curse about yourself, you say the enemies of the Jew, but maybe it means maybe the Jewish people were guilty of being destroyed because they violated Yom Kippur, they didn't fast Yom Kippur. Yotzo baskoil v'amru lahem. So the voice came out and said to them, Kulchem zumonim l'chaye ha'olam habo. You are all ready and destined for the life of the world to come. Well, how did they get such an allowance? Where do they learn it from that they're allowed to not fast on Yom Kippur? How would they learn it? How do they know that they can violate Yom Kippur? Where do they get that from? So the Gemara, my Dorush, what did they expound? Where did they take it from that they don't have to fast? They don't have to keep Yom Kippur. Amru, they said like this. Kal v'chomer, they made a oratory. And they learned it from the fact that during the inauguration of the Mishkan, the Nisim, the princes, they brought every day a korban, and they even brought it on Shabbos. So they saw that the dedication of the Mishkan, it override the korban of an individual, overrided it, and on Shabbos he can bring a korban. They said so. And that's the Mishkan. Mishkan was only a temporary kedusha, wasn't an eternal kedusha, and yet it overrid it the celebration, the inauguration. So they say the inauguration of the permanent Beis Hamikdash, of the structure that Shlomo built, of sure should override Yom Kippur, which is not as strict as Shabbos. Let's see what the Gemara says. My daughters, Amru, they said, Kal v'chomer, this is a oratory. Uma mishkan she'ein kedushase kedushas olam. Since the Mishkan, whose sanctity is not an eternal sanctity, because it was just temporary, and then they allowed even for korban yachid. The sacrifice was an individual. That was each prince brought one day, and one of them was on Shabbos. The korban yachid shel nisim. It was an individual. It wasn't a community. It was the princes. That was their korban. Doicha Shabbos. It overrides the Shabbos. The Isur Skila Shabbos, which is a prohibition of Skila. The Chomer Mekaris Isur Skila, which is more serious than Koris, because violating Yom Kippur, not fasting on Yom Kippur, is only punishable by Koris, not by Skila. So that means that violating Yom Kippur is not as serious as offense as violating Shabbos. And yet, Shabbos, we find they violated the Shabbos, the Korban Yochid of the Nisim, that it overrid the Shabbos. So they made the oratory Migdosh Digdushose. Kedushas Olam, the Migdosh, whose sanctity is a eternal sanctity, because the Migdosh stays there forever, the place of the Migdosh, the second place of Migdosh, and then eventually everything, the Kedusha, remains there forever. And here we're talking about the Korban Tzibur. We're talking a communal sacrifice, because Rashi explains the Korban Tzibur, the Mashoy Makrivim b'mei Chanukas Tzibur, Chanukas Habayis, that which they brought during the inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash, Korban Tzibur, that was a communal sacrifice. It's brought by the whole community. And so it's not as stringent. It's more stringent. It's a more important korban, because the korban tzibur, and it's a lesser violation. But Yemad Kippurim Donish Kodesh, and it's only Yom Kippur, which is only the penalty of Kodesh. Like Kolchkin, of course, we can violate it. That's how they learned it, that they can violate it because it's more important. If we find that you can violate Shabbos by an individual, for sure you can violate with a korban tzibur Yom Kippur, which is not as stringent as Shabbos. Okay. So so why were they worried about? So why did they worry, and they said that, what's going to happen. And the Gemara answers the reason that we're worried. Over there, why did they bring? That was for the need of Hashem. Tzorech Gavoyo. Also, b'mishkan de Gavoya have karbonis. This was Hashem instructed them to bring the karbonis. It was the purpose of the karbonis was to bring an offering to Hashem, as opposed to the karbonis over here was the good meal. They had a meal over here. The hedyot mishta. It was a party. The reason was a party. So therefore, maybe they didn't know is, in other words, over there they just did the korban. Over here they actually had the meals. They violated Yom Kippur by eating. Eating is not a korban. It's not a holy matter. So therefore, they were worried. Maybe they weren't supposed to eat. Okay, one thing is to bring a korban. Fine. But eating, why should you be eating then? Why should you be a party? That's a personal thing. That's not for Hashem. So, frag the Gemara, Hochinami, Mevid Levdu, Mechel Nechelish, Taka. Good point. So, why didn't they just do the korbanos? But they shouldn't have eaten and drinking. So, you're saying they're worried that they were eating and drinking. Why didn't they Taka do? Even though they had a clue that it's more important, that it can override Yom Kippur, the fact that they're doing malacha, they're bringing the korbanos and them. Well, why should they eat? Achanami, love the korbanos. They should make the korbanos, but they shouldn't be eating. Oh, and the Gemara says, "Ein simcha beloy achila u'shtiya." Cannot be simcha if you don't eat and drink. If you're supposed to rejoice, you're supposed to be Chanukah Sabayis, you must eat. If you don't eat or drink, can't be simcha. So they couldn't just make the korbanos and not eat. On Yom Kippur, they needed to eat. So I guess they were still worried because it was selfish, it was personal, but still they figured that's the way to do it. And the Eibishter, the voice came out that they did the right thing. Apparently, this is somewhat of a gray area. They thought that, but they needed to be b'simcha because the inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash, and they couldn't be b'simcha if they didn't eat to drink. So they allowed him. So they did it, and the Eibishter, but they were worried, and the Maskell came out. Kulchem zumonim l'chayolam habo. I mean, that's a strange way also of saying it. They could have told him, okay, you did okay. You're not going to get destroyed. Not only is they not going to get destroyed, he says you're all ready for Olam Haba. Why? For violating Yom Kippur. For eating, for rejoicing, knowing what your what the most important thing is. It's interesting. Now, the Gemara wants to know, how did the Taka know? The whole reason we're learning it out, because by the inauguration of the Mishkan, it overrode the korban of the prince, overrode the Shabbos. How do we know it? Maybe the prince did not bring his korban on Shabbos. The Mishkan was inaugurated on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan then was on Sunday. And maybe when it came the seventh day, which was Shabbos, maybe they didn't do a korban then, because they pushed it off so after Shabbos. What do you know that the Mishkan overrides the Shabbos? So, if you're going to say, because it says in the Pasuk that they brought it by Yom HaRishon or by Yom HaShvi, on the first and the seventh day, of course, the seventh day is Shabbos. Bayom Hashvi Mashmalon Yom Zayin Hainu Shabbos. And we think that the seventh day is Shabbos, so you saw they brought Bayom Harishon, Bayom Hashini, Bayom Hashlish, Bayom Riv, Bayom Chamish, Bayom Shvi. Bayom Hashvi, that's Shabbos, so it means Bayom Hashvi. It says the Nasi brought it. Mashmalon Yom Zayin Hainu Shabbos, and the seventh day is Shabbos. And the Gemara says maybe the seventh doesn't mean the seventh day of the week. Maybe it means the seventh leader. So if the sixth leader, let's say, did it on Friday, the seventh didn't do it on Shabbos. He did it on Sunday. He still call him the seventh. By Yom Hashvi, meaning not on the seventh day of the weekday, but on the seventh after the sixth one. Then they skip the Shabbos. Maybe the Shvi the Karbonis. Sheim hikriv nasi shishi b'erev Shabbos. If the sixth leader did on erev Shabbos and Friday, makriv nasi shvi b'echad b'Shabbos. He taka brought on the first day of the week. He brought on Sunday, not on Shabbos. Umay shvi. So what is the meaning shvi? It says shvi is shvi l'korban nasi. He's the seventh nasi that brought it, but not the seventh day of the week. So how do we even know that it overrode by the nasi, that it overrode the Shabbos? How do we know that? Amar Rab Nachman bar Yitzchok, Amar Kro, the pasuk says over there, B'yoim ashtei osor, and the pasuk adds the word yoim. It says on the 11th day. So we learn from here, Mag yoim kula rotzuf. A day is consecutive. That's a full day. There's no interruption. So 11 is also consecutive. It's not no days in between. To tell you that it's just like a day, that it was continuous. Just like a day is continuous in its day, same thing 11 was continuous. So there was no interruption from the 1st to the 11th till the 7th wasn't Shabbos. You say to mashma, this extra yom, it means ma yom rotzuf she'eba hefsek af kulu yudalef yom rotzuf the leka hefsek ben time. They were all consecutive days. There was no day in between. Afilu b'Shabbos. So the Gemara says the Dilma Yomim Haru'uyim. Maybe what it means, consecutive days in fit days, which means not a Shabbos day in between. It still means consecutive, yes. Consecutive days, one after the other, but days that are fitting for a korban, which would not be in Shabbos. So you're saying just like the Yom is consecutive in one day, over it's also consecutive 11th day, but of days that you can make Yom Haruim. Yom Haruim, maybe it means fit days. And they want to answer Ksiv Krachim is another extra. It says B'Yom Shneim Asar Yom. So over there it says also. So Ma Yom Kul Rotzuf means because Av Shneim Asar Yom Kul Merutzufim. So we have an extra Yom over there also, just like a Yom is continuous. These 12 Fragimar again. But maybe it means consecutive Yom Haruim. But now we have already two psukim. In that case, why would we need 2 times Yom? So the second time tells us it was actually every single day. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos also. So we see that Shabbos overrides, the Nasi overrides the individual personal korban as overridden the Shabbos. Okay.
Still
So
seems a little difficult. Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to grasp that they just finished on Yom Kippur because in order to get people from around the country, it's not like you just send that, put it on email, and people were traveling for days to get there. It must, it seemed like they would have to have planned it out.
what you're asking is what? How did they make the party on Yom Kippur?
Yeah, it's not that they just finished on Yom Kippur. They said, okay, let's do a party. I mean, these things don't happen overnight.
They didn't do the Yom Kippur then that year.
Yeah, right, right. So it still seems like why didn't they do the Hanukkah to buy it after Sukkot then? If it was just ready before Sukkot,
But
people were there, then you could keep them. I mean, I can't imagine nowadays any rabbi saying, okay, we're not having Yom Kippur this year.
yeah, well, we don't have a building of a Beis Hamikdash now.
I bet if we did, we still wouldn't get
It was
agreement on
unique
that.
because they built the Beis Hamikdash.
Okay.
All right, we'll leave it at that. I'm sure there is a lot to delve into all the details, but this is on the simple level in the Gemara over here that we're learning. Uh, Now the Gemara says, how do we know that that the Beis Hamikdash is doiche Yom Kippurim minola? How do we really know, Taka? This is maybe goes along with your question. Where does we know that making an inauguration of the Mikdash pushed away Yom Kippur? Maybe the celebration skipped Yom Kippur, so they could do like 3 days before. The fact that it says 7 days, how do we know that one of those days was Yom Kippur? Maybe they skipped Yom Kippur, so they had 7 days of celebration, but not Yom Kippur. How do we know that the Mikdash overrides Yom Kippurim? If you're going to say because it says 14 days, why would it mean? V'dilmo Yomim Haruim. But maybe that means days that are fit, meaning not including Yom Kippur. Dilma Yom Haruim leMishta Ovid Mishta Lafuk Yom Kippurim. Maybe the days that are fit to make a party, he made a party, but that doesn't include Yom Kippur. When it says Gomer Yom Yom Mahoso, he learns Yom Yom from the other pasuk. Menisim the Mishkan the Gamrina Metrei Kroi David Tzufim Afilu B'Shabbos. Over there we learn from the two psukim that they were consecutive days, no interruption for the Shabbos, even on Shabbos. Af Mishta the Chanukas Habayis have Yudal the Tzufim Afilu B'Yom Kippurim. It was consecutive, so they did it in Kippur as well. That's why we understand it from the pasuk. So the Gemara quoted that Yotzo Baskoil Ba'amra Lahem Kulam Izman L'Chayim Haba. He says, Kulchem, you are all ready for the world to come. Pray the Gemara, okay, we're saying the Baskil, but no lon. Where do we know from the pasuk the Achil Luhu that Hashem forgiven them? Maybe He didn't forgive them. Maybe they weren't allowed to do that. You heard a voice came out from the heaven, but I guess that's not sufficient. The Gemara said the Tony Tachlifa. Tachlifa learned. It says in the pasuk Malachim Aleph Ches, Vayoyim Hashmini Sholach Hasaom. On the 8th day, that was after Sukkot, he sent the people home. By Vorchos HaMelech, they blessed the king. By Yelchul Ohaleim, they went to their tents. Smeichim, happy, v'toive levav, and good hearts. Al kol ha'toiva asher osa Hashem l'David avdoi u'l'Yisrael amai. For all the good that Hashem has done to his servant David and to his people. What is this all languages that he uses over here? So it says they went to their tents. So Rashi lo'oleim to their tents means, so the Gemara, shaholchu motzu nishem betara. They went home and they found that their wives were clean. Smeichim, why were they happy? Shenenu miziv hashchina, because they enjoyed the ray of the divine. Betuvi leiv, they were good hearts. Shekol echad ve'echad nisabra ishte ben zochar. Each and every one, his wife became pregnant with a male. Al kol ha'toiva, what is all the good? Sheyotza baskel v'amru lahem. Kol ha'toiva, the baskel came out and said to them, Kulchem zumonim l'chayol mabo. You're all ready for the world to come. And then it says, LeDavid Avdoi Uli Yisrael Amai. So his servant David and people nation. So Meila Hashem has to forgive the Yidden because they did. Bishleim Uli Yisrael Amai. We understand why it says Yisrael Amai for his nation people, because the Achilu Avin Yom Kippurim. He forgave them the sin of Yom Kippur. They ate. They celebrate Yom Kippur. They didn't fast. Elul David Avdi Mahi. But what does it mean for his servant David? What happened for his servant David? So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Rav says Rabbi Yehuda, name of Rav. When Shlomo wanted to bring the Oren inside of the sanctuary, Dovku Sha'orim Zelozeh, the gates pasted to each other, they didn't want to open up. They didn't want the Aron in. They didn't let the Aron in. Omar Shloimo, Esrim V'Arba Renonis. He said 24 songs, but V'loi Nena. He was not responded to. Didn't help him. The doors didn't open. Rashi says Chavdal Renonis Ksiv Beparsha. There's 24 times Renona in the portion. Bein Rino Tchino Tfilo Bakoshe, whatever it is that Pasar V'Omar. So he opened and he said, so at that point he said, Su'u Sh'orim Rasheichem V'Goymer, open up gates, but they didn't answer. It wasn't answered. But then it says in Divrei Yom Beis Vav, Hashem Elikim al Toshiv Pnei Mishichecha. Hashem God, don't turn back the face of your anointed one. Zochro lechazdei David Avdecha. Remember the kindness of your servant David. Miyad Nena. Immediately he was responded to. So that means LeDavid, because they were answered at that point. He was answered by the Eibishter. So that's why we say over here the David Avdi. The David Avdi was the response that David got. Okay, let's leave it over here. Wish everybody will hear good news, especially in Israel and Iran, good health. And everybody should have a good week. Hope to see everybody again next week, same time, same station.
Do you want to change the time so you around Marv?
Well, but it does. We tried it in the past. The 7:30 work. I think in the past it didn't work. I mean, I loved it, but if 7:30 works, that would work better next week. But actually, next week 7:00 should be okay.
Okay, I'm fine either way. Just
All right. We'll communicate via text next week.
Okay, I just feel bad if I'm pulling you away from Marv. So.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.